the opposite of what you expect with typical sonata allegro forms, in which you have more, aggressive A theme and more lyrical B theme. But so this has the opposite. So the B theme is more aggressive, and you see all of these really extreme dynamic markings. So in that first measure where the tempo changes, it goes from forte for a beat, then to piano, and then there's a crescendo to forte, another crescendo, then piano again, and so forth. It's just, very kind of volatile sounding in the way that that is giving these dynamic extremes. So at that tempo change, it presents a fully diminished seventh harmony, and it is going to end up cadencing on the key that you expect, but it doesn't go there right away with strong 5/1 cadences. At the bottom of the page, it does end up cadencing in B major, but the rest of the first page is the B theme. And so it's kind of fitting it into this sonata allegro structure, but the lengths and the proportions, everything is very different. So if you turn over to the next page, you then have a development section that's working with the A theme. So this is all A theme that's just being sequenced. At the bottom of the page, the last three measures, you then have an inverted dominant pedal tone. So you have a B that's sounding in the top voice in the right hand. And that's the beginning of the retransition. And so that continues until the recap on the next page, in the fourth measure of the next page, in measure 48. And now when the recap occurs, instead of it being piano and dolce, now it's forte, and the hands are at the far extremes of the keyboard. It's the same situation with the A theme being very brief, and so it's interrupted again with this tempo change on the third system. And again, same characteristic as on the first page when you first heard that B theme. And it has a cadence at the bottom of the page on E major, so it's it's going to end up in tonic, which is the key you expect. But it has lots of unexpected harmonic shifts. So it goes immediately from touching on C major on measure 61 and 62. So 61 is a G7 harmony. The last 16th note of that measure is a C major. And then you have another C major arpeggio, and then immediately it goes from C major to E major. And those kind of shifts of harmonies that are a third apart using chromatic medium relationships is something later Beethoven works use. So you have that idea too, just being more harmonically advanced and adventurous. The last two lines are just E major, and it just is one of those passages that has this very, sublime effect as it gets to the very bottom of the page, and then you have the coda section that's all in the upper treble part of the instrument. So the coda then brings back the A theme material, a couple of phrases of that, and then at measure 75 you have a little chorale section, and then a final passage at 86 that's based on the A theme that is just rising all the way to the top of the instrument, and then ends just with the E major triad. So it's a good example of this, of a late Beethoven sonata movement. It's then followed by a second movement that's just the opposite, that is in E minor, and that is very quick. Prestissimo is as fast as tempo that you have. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's listen to this first movement. correct view, second movement. So one thing we'll put here is the just the unusual and really creative use of the traditional forms. So it's really pushing the limits of what had ever been done before, and really takes the piano sonata as well as the symphony, the string quartet, all this sonata cycle works into new realms and new territory. And this literature of late Beethoven is the most exalted in the whole repertoire as far as being the most profound and having the most respected and revered status. So second movement of this work is it's a sonatina type form, and that has a very short development section that does have the expected A theme and B theme. So the A theme is presented straight away as fortissimo. Your ear will be attracted to the top line, which is the main theme, but the bass line also is really important. He writes there ben marcato. So you're supposed to really accent the left hand, descending octave line. And so that's an 8-measure theme. You then have some discussion of that theme on the next section. And it leads to a cadence at measure 24. And then at measure 25, you start a transition. And again, it's very active. It has lots of movement. It basically has the feeling of, kind of two voices, but it leads to a, touching on the key of C major at the bottom of that page. Turn over to the next page, then it moves from C major to B minor. And so the B theme is at measure 57, where it says forte. And it is in the minor dominant key. So this is the Beethoven Piano Sonata in E major, Opus 109. (1822). First movement is Sonata Allegro. Second movement is a sonatina. So short development. It's the same basic idea as Sonata Allegro. So you have an example of an invertible counterpoint there at measure 57. The right hand has the ascending scale. The left hand has the descending octave part, and then at measure 61, the hands change parts. And so that kind of situation where the top line can become the bottom line can become the top line, where they flip registers, is an example of invertible counterpoint. And final little statement, or closing idea that references the A theme at 66. And then the development starts at measure 70. This theme that's being developed at the beginning of the development section at 70 is based on the left hand from the very opening theme. So it's just developing the first 4 measures of the left hand. passage at the beginning of the movement, and it's something that has a little canonic writing that's going on in the right hand. So you have that 4-measure motive, and then 2 measures later it's followed in the right hand, a 4th higher. So you have this canon that's going on between those voices, and so that's another, little contrapuntal element. And then you have more chorale kind of writing at the bottom of the page. The thing that happens in this development is just the opposite of what you typically have in a development section, which is that a lot of times will feature a big buildup to the retransition, leading into a real strong restatement of the A theme and the recap. And so that would very often be the loudest point and the most dramatic point. But in this particular development, it's just the opposite, where everything stops. At measure 96, you have a fermata over that F sharp major triad. And then pianissimo, you have another idea, measure 102, then you have just triads that are pianissimo, sounding on the downbeats with rests for the rest of the measure. So it's really the softest point in the movement. And so the motion totally stops. And it's real jarring when the recap occurs at 105 then. The recap at 105 then, as the opening, like you had at the beginning, and at measure 111, then it's, or measure 112, it's rewritten so that you have then the right hand having the octaves and the left hand having the 8th note theme. So the hands switch parts again. And it leads to a cadence at measure 120. And then you have a retransition at 120. This is all very similar to what you had in the exposition. And it brings back the B theme in tonic, so in the E minor at measure 157. And a very brief little codetta at the end. So it really has a feverish kind of quality to it. So first movement is in E major, second movement E minor, and in the second movement both themes, both A theme and B theme, are in minor keys. So be prepared to talk a little bit about late Beethoven works, what you can expect to find, and to be able to talk a little bit about this sonata with some of these elements of late Beethoven style. All right. The next composer that we're going to talk about is Frédéric Chopin. And Frédéric Chopin is all about the piano. So he wrote almost exclusively for solo piano. Everything that he wrote had piano in it. So these are works that he was writing for himself. He was a great virtuoso. He and Franz Liszt are the two who were dominating the